let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, a couple of introductions. My name is Jay Affelt. I'm the Associate Superintendent for High Schools, supporting our 7 high schools across MMSD. We very much appreciate your time this evening to learn more about our facilities and about our 2024 referenda. So we'll start with just a couple of housekeeping things. I want to first of all introduce Renee and Jenny, who are here to support with ASL. And then Phil and Adriana, do you want to say just a few words about support for translation?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Phil Yang. I'm representative Hmong, interpreting for the Hmong tonight. So if any Hmong who are parents who are here tonight, I'll be available. We're going to have one of the headsets over here. So thank you for having us. We're representing the ICM, which is stand for Interpreter Cooperative of Madison.
Hi, hola. My name is Adriana. With Julio, we are going to be the Spanish interpreters for tonight's session. We come from the Interpreters Cooperative of Madison. Venimos de la Cooperativa de Intérpretes de Madison y ofrecemos servicio de interpretación simultánea en español. Muchas gracias.
Nhớ rằng mình nói về món xài lúa phong thì về món bây giờ nên đỡ một số thì sẽ là tốt rồi mà nói thì về món bây giờ nhớ rằng thì sẽ.
Thank you. Also want to make sure you know that there's bathrooms. Feel free to leave whenever you need to. You came past the bathrooms on your way in. They're back by the main office of Sherman Middle School. Tonight, we're trying something a little different. You also have note cards at your tables. You also have a couple post-it notes that I'll address a little bit later. On your note card, we're going to invite you to write questions that come to you as you're listening to the presentation. You're going to be hearing from a few different people. You're going to see quite a few slides as we work our way through the information tonight. It's likely to result in a number of questions, and feel free to jot them down on the cards. We'll be picking up the note cards throughout the presentation. When you have a question ready that you feel the group should be answering for the larger group, please raise your hand. I wanted to introduce Ellie Herman and Marty Glazer from our communications team. Can you raise your hand? They'll be coming around to pick up your questions. You can just draw them over, and then they'll relay them to our team for answering a little bit later. They'll be theming and organizing those questions and either answering them sort of in the context of the presentation or a little bit later. I'd also like to recognize and thank our principals for hosting us tonight. So we have Principal Alex Thompson from Sherman Middle School. Where did Alex go? Oh. How did I miss you? I also want to introduce Assistant Principal Miranda Salguero Mendoza, back here, for Sherman Middle School. And brand new this year, Malcolm Shabazz City High School Principal Nathan O'Shaughnessy. Nathan was meeting with Shabazz family. So Shabazz family is welcome, Sherman family is welcome. Thank you all for being here. Also want to recognize that you may not all have children who are here at school or be MMSD staff members. You may be neighbors. You may be just taxpayers who are interested in what MMSD is talking about, and for that we thank you. I would also like to introduce my colleague, Dr. Angie Hicks. She is the Associate Superintendent for Middle Schools, and some of you may already know her name or have interactions with her throughout your time connected here at Sherman. And I would like to introduce our Board of Education member who's here this evening. Blair Mosner-Feltham is going to say just a few words in just a second. But I also want to take a moment to pause. We have a number of other MMSD staff members here. Can you just raise your hand if you're connected to MMSD in some way? Thank you. Through conversation later, hopefully you get a chance to meet many of them, whether they're teachers here in either Sherman or Shabazz or in our central office. I also want to ask if there are any other current or formerly elected officials that are with us tonight. And if so, please stand and identify so we can recognize you too. Seeing none, I'm going to hand it over to Board Member Blair.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Oh, this is great. I'm so excited to see you all. Thank you for taking your Tuesday night, like at the end of summer, to be here. It's really, I'm a public school true believer, partly because it's a community endeavor, and part of what makes public schools so special and so beautiful and so worth all of the energy and resources that we put into it is that we decide together through an elected school board and through community engagement sessions, like what we want to see for the young people of our community. So I'm really, really appreciative of you spending your time here. And I cannot wait to hear what you have to say, because your input is what we're gonna need to know to figure out what's next for our young people in Madison. So thank you for being here, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. With that, I will hand it over to Dr. Gothard, our superintendent.
Thank you, Board Member Moser-Feldman. Good to see you all. I'm Joe Gothard, Superintendent, all of about 90 days now, I think, or so. But I'm really excited to be here and share just a few introduction slides with you, and then share a video on how state budgets work and for education in the state of Wisconsin. So if we could just go to the first slide here, again, just some general grounding. Who are we? Who is MMSD? And for those of you who aren't aware, I'm born and raised here. So, you know, when I look at who makes up the Madison Metropolitan School District, it's something that I have a lot of really strong feelings about in such a great way. My whole experience coming through K through 12, I saw the kinds of changes when I went to teach and then became a principal and assistant superintendent. I experienced the change in diversity in our community and in our schools. And I know how important it was to me, and I think it was important and is important to the entire community. We are a school district of 52 schools, 25,200 students, more than 6,000 staff. I think it's important to note that when you look at our diversity, about 60% of MMSD students identify as a racial student of color. In 1970, we were 100,000 people less in the city, and the school district was 13% students of color at that time. So that's quite a change. Some of you may have also heard that there is a big change coming to Dane County, Madison as well, and the population is expected to truly grow. And I think we'll continue to see trends like this in that time. And for me, it makes me reflect on what is the school district to the people of this community and the students that we serve. And I think it's a wonderful time for us to reflect on how we can best meet those needs. Also point out that free and reduced price meal or economically disadvantaged, that is a number that's generated from the percent of students who qualify for free or reduced price meals. And that number for quite a while now, even though I've been gone 11 years, has hovered right about that 50%. Next slide, please. These are some of the things that I'd like to boast about for MMSD, things that we're really proud of in our school district. We have a long tradition of National Merit Scholars, 26 in our school district. 21 of our schools offer dual language immersion. That number, again, in 2013 when I left was quite a bit lower. To see how it's expanded is really exciting. This one, I think, many people are a little bit surprised by. 61% of MMSD students have some sort of college earned credit before they graduate. That's impressive. It truly is. And you know, while it would be great to take the credit as a school district for that, that wouldn't be possible without a variety of different partners, Madison College, and so many other industry partners who provide a real-life, real college-like experience for our students while they're still in high school. As many of you know, if you've been in Madison, that stringed instruments is really important, and especially that we begin in elementary school. That's not the same across the state, that's for sure. That's an investment that the community has made, that the district has continued to value. 27 of our schools offer full or half-day 4K. That number is about 1,450 of our youngest scholars are in our schools each and every day, most in full day, some in half day. I saw a group walking down the hallway today, and it always makes me stop and just look at our future. It's truly amazing to see our youngest learners in our buildings. And one thing I'll say about that, well, we'll get to that a little bit later. I know Bob is going to go through some of the facts, and just in terms of how we're funded for the very things that I'm so proud of, and I know our community has come to value and expect, quite honestly, from us. What is our focus areas? Early learning is a focus. We know that it's a high quality learning experience is great for our children. The change to full day as being the preferred model is because we don't want interruptions during the school day, and it's very difficult for families as well to say it's 10:30, okay, now you have to leave work and find childcare in the afternoon. The full day experience really is preferable for so many of our families and our stakeholders, so it's important to us. Multilingual education, as I mentioned, 30% of scholars in MMSD qualify as English language learners. And that is truly incredible. And again, something that's changed quite a bit. And we want to make sure that not only our non-native English speakers or our native students who have joined us can speak their language proficiently, but they can have exposure to a variety of languages. And when you have an exposure to a variety of languages, culture is part of that as well. And something that we should be extremely proud of as a community, that our students here truly experience a global education when we are at our best. Well-rounded opportunities, again, we want to make sure co-curriculars, arts, music, some of the renovations we just did at the high schools to see those new spaces filled with students is quite impressive. And I think if you haven't been in those spaces, I would invite you to find time to do some open houses at those schools. And then lastly, culture and climate. We want to make sure that our schools are safe and orderly and staffed and clean and everything that comes to operating a high-quality school district. So how did we get here? The questions that you are going to observe tonight. So typically superintendents begin in July. Well, I knew in February that, you know what, Madison's been talking, MMSD's been talking about a referendum. I don't want to wait till July to start. So I got permission from my previous board and this board to start early. I wanted to be here. I wanted to be responsible with the Board of Education for this referendum work. So in the spring and early summer, we came together and had some input sessions. We did a survey. I would imagine some of you may have taken that. But we also came together as an advisory group and really tested each other from various perspectives on how could we shape these referendum questions. You know, is it one question, is it two, is it three, is it none? You know, those were all options on the table as we came together. And from that work, along with the survey responses, you know, I was able to share from administration to our Board of Education a recommendation for the two questions that that the community is going to consider on November 5th. And I think to say it much better than I could, here's a 4-minute video, as I mentioned, on school funding in the state of Wisconsin. And immediately after this, Bob Soldner, our Assistant Superintendent for Business and Financial Services, is going to present the particulars on that as well. So again, thank you all for being here, and please watch our video.
Our public schools are the cornerstone of our community. The education and opportunities we provide for students today shape their futures and ours. Schools, like any organization, need money to operate. But in Wisconsin, funding the needs of our schools has been a growing challenge. State policy limits how much school districts can spend. The vast majority of school funding comes from a combination of state dollars and local property taxes. It's called the revenue limit, and it acts as a cap per student that school districts can spend each year. Even if school costs go above this level, schools can't spend any more than this limit. From 1994 to 2009, these revenue caps were adjusted for inflation, which meant they helped schools keep up with ongoing needs. But since 2010, the resources districts need to survive have fallen farther and farther behind the basic costs to operate our schools. By the end of 2025, the revenue limit will have fallen more than $3,300 per student behind inflation. In the Madison Metropolitan School District, with roughly 25,000 students, that's a decrease of more than $82 million. What's more, each district has a different revenue cap, and these caps are not tied to the needs of the students or the costs to the schools that serve them. Our job as a school district is to make sure all of our students have access to the exceptional educational opportunities we provide, no matter what their needs when they walk through our doors. But state funding falls short of what it costs to meet the specific needs of many of our students. When that happens, we have to use money from our general fund to cover the difference, which means taking dollars from other important needs. The largest portion of our budget goes towards staffing. Our people are the heart of our schools. Without enough educators who instruct, support, and inspire learning, schools can't provide the lessons, programs, and opportunities our students deserve. Other important budget items include curriculum, technology, transportation, operations, and maintenance. We work hard to balance our budgets, yet resources for schools have been shrinking year after year since 2010. With costs growing faster than funding, districts are always looking for ways to trim costs and work smarter, like deferring needed school maintenance, cutting programs, reducing staff, and many other strategies. But schools can only cut so much before they start to harm educational opportunities for their students. To maintain class sizes, keep up with rising costs, take care of school buildings, and protect high-quality instruction, many districts have turned to their community to help fill the state-imposed funding gap. Since the arrival of revenue limits, over 80% of school districts have done so by asking local voters to raise their caps through an operational referendum. Most have used the option multiple times. Our children don't have time to wait for state policymakers to fix the school funding system. By putting the needs of our students first, we are investing in their potential and the future of our whole community. Strong schools make strong communities where families want to move and stay. Learn more about school funding by visiting our website.
I want to do a little bit of highlight, right? Bob Soldner, Assistant Superintendent of Financial Services. I've been in the business of school finance since I'll date myself, late 90s. And so I think it's real important to give a little bit more context to the video that you just had that explains a very, very complicated and not straightforward or transparent school finance system that we have in Wisconsin. And so the first point I want to make is about revenues, right? So there's a state law, it's called the School District Revenue Limits. Other municipalities also have these revenue limits. And what the revenue limits do, and what they have been for over a dozen years, what the legislature has decided to do is, in essence, freeze ongoing revenues in terms of revenues that match inflationary increases, right? And so the state has intentionally created a system where school districts and school boards do not have sufficient ongoing revenues to meet costs. We all know about inflation. We all know about costs are always going up. And these are ongoing costs that continue without an ongoing sustainable revenue stream. And so I've heard some people say, well, you're just blaming the state legislature or you're blaming this. And I'm not doing that at all. And if it sounds like it, I am not doing that. I want to explain school finance. And so state law says we're going to limit your ongoing revenue, but state law also says school boards, if you want sustainable revenue to match your ongoing costs, you have to vote to ask the voters to give you permission to raise that ongoing revenue. And that's exactly what the school board has done, right? So tonight, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on the revenues, then I'm going to talk a little bit about the referendum, and then we want to talk specifically about the handouts that you all have on your table to kind of explain a little bit more how the 10 schools and 7 school sites were picked in terms of the referendum question. All right, so I've got very little time and I've already burned some of my precious 20 minutes, so I'm going to jump right on in. First, to give some dollar amounts to that limited revenue that I was talking about, over 23-24 last year and this school year alone, $30.2 million is the revenue gap. That is, if our revenue had been tied to simple CPI, the board, the community, would have $30.2 million in additional ongoing revenues. We don't, right? So that's a shortfall. The other shortfalls exist for a variety of reasons, really in terms of federal and state law. When it comes to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, there's a requirement, an excellent requirement, that requires school districts to provide services for students when they need those services, particularly identified in an individualized education plan. Madison does a phenomenal job of providing these services, but it comes with a cost. Initially, the federal government, when they passed the law, said they'd fund 40% of those costs. The federal government kind of funds anywhere from 10 to 13% of those costs. The state also has a specific set of aid that says, historically, we will share in those costs with you. State law used to say upwards of 2/3 of those costs would be covered by the state. For us, this past school year, the state reimbursed us for about 31% of those costs, which are important costs, as I've stressed. However, they're not funded costs with revenues from the federal government and the state government. So what that resulted in us doing is taking $66 million of our general fund revenues to pay for these costs, right? We're not the only district in that situation. Statewide, that's about a $1.5 billion difference in costs that districts have to go to this revenue stream that's controlled by the state and constrained not to increase, right? So that adds to the gap in terms of ongoing sustainable revenues to cover the rest of the general cost of the district. And then finally, which is ironic if it wouldn't be so sad, I guess, is the state considers 4-year-old kindergarten as a half a child, both for revenue limits and state aid distribution. Joe mentioned the focus of the school board in Madison District has been to continue to expand 4-year-old from half day to full day, and we will continue to invest in the early literacy and early education. But the state counts it as a half child, and we have full day of costs, and we're only getting half a child of revenue. That also adds to the gaps that we're dealing with each year. Again, just explaining kind of the context of the revenue picture. Okay, a little bit about the investments the school board continues to make. Every year for several years, the board has levied recently $5 million specifically for facility maintenance, ongoing facility maintenance out of our operating budget. In total, since 2008, that is $93 million specifically for facilities. Now, that's a lot of money, but it is nowhere near the level of funds that is needed for our facilities, and the facility investment is nowhere near what we need to do on any one year, nor could we handle it in any one referendum period in terms of 4 or 5 years. So the facility conversation, I kind of look at it as really 4 big parts in terms of that have informed the board and to ask in terms of the facility questions. And your handouts talk a little bit about it. A facility condition report was done back in the fall of 2023. We followed that up with continued public input and analysis of our facilities, came up with a long-range facilities plan, and then the board had a final memo in June before they voted to improve the facilities. And what those reports showed us was that we have 26 of our schools are more than 60 years old, and 40 of our schools received a C or a D. We have 52 schools in total. Why is that the case? Probably most primarily because the Madison School District is the oldest school district in Dane County. We have old buildings because we've been around for a long time. And I would say the community and the board has invested in these facilities, but they've just really outlived their useful lives, right? And so we'll get a little bit more into the details of what exactly that does that mean. I need a screen where I can see the videos right here. All right, I talked a lot about the referendum. Now I'm going to get into the specifics. There are 2 questions that are going to go to the voters on November 5th. One is an operating referendum for $100 million. The other is a facilities referendum for $570 million. We can roll to the next. All right, the facilities operating referendum really focuses on the points that Joe made earlier in terms of continuing our investment, and more than just an investment, but a commitment to excellence in terms of the big focus areas. First and foremost, it's our staff retaining and attracting high-quality, diverse students, along with being taught by high-quality and diverse student body. It requires money and investment. So that is a continuation of the board in terms of the priorities in the community. I've already mentioned the continual investment and expansion of full-day 4-year-old kindergarten, and then our multilingual education, which is offered at 21 schools, which the board is committed to continuing to expand the programming to prepare our students for a globalized economy, and then also the well-rounded opportunity. It's not just about the academics, it's about the extracurriculars, it's about the activities, the school clubs, really school communities, the school buildings, being a community in focal point. Jay gets to talk about the cool dream boards that are coming up, but they're over here on the side of the room in terms of what is capable. All right, sustainable revenue is critical. The board has a budget for 24-25. They adopted in June. The board's going to be talking about approving 2 budgets come October. One budget that will be in place if the referendum for operations is successful. A second budget if the referendum is not successful. But the referendum to ask and provide additional ongoing revenues is really scaffolded up to $100 million over 4 years. 30 million this fall, an additional 30 million in fall of 25, followed by another 20 million in 26, and then 20 million in 27 for a combined $100 million base increase, ongoing sustainable revenues. The first year tax impact is about $26, and then that scaffolds up, $26 a month, then that scaffolds up to $87 a month after that 4th year, 27, 28, and then we'll continue at that level into the future, right? Okay. The facilities referendum is, on one hand, I think a little bit more complicated because the funding is a little bit more complicated. It talks about sale of bonds that we would have when the projects come due. But really the referendum, again, a continued commitment to excellence, but it's really about modernizing our infrastructure, focusing first and foremost on HVAC, air conditioning, heating, and our plumbing mechanicals, and I'll get into a little bit more when we talk about the specifics of the buildings at Sherman and Shabazz. But the other part about it is the facility question talks about, which I think is really more important because this is so much more than bricks and mortars. It's really about academic environment. It's really about envisioning middle schools with STEM classrooms and modern academic spaces, much like we just completed at voter approval our comprehensive high schools. If you haven't been into any of those high schools, it's really worth a look. It is phenomenal in terms of the spaces, not only for STEM, but the trades and music and art, just amazing spaces. The same thing the board is committed to begin to do with this referendum at middle schools and high priorities of critical elementary schools that are really beyond their useful mechanical life. All right. The facilities referendum, again, is structured at $507 million. It's $27 a month starting in 2025. There will be no levy impact this fall. That's an estimate of the payments of selling the bonds. So the $507 million is authority to pay for the cost of the construction that will occur over a 5-year period. So as construction bills come due, we anticipate that bill coming due, and the $507 million allows the board to sell bonds. And once those bonds are sold, we create a 20-year principal and interest debt repayment back that will go 20 years for each one of the sales. We're thinking right now probably about 3 sales. So I talk about the impact over 23 years because we'll have 3 sales of the bonds, and each of those sales will go for 20 years. But the estimate of $27 a month is an annual impact over the life of those bonds coming due, levied the same amount to pay off the principal and interest. Okay, this is critical, and we want to talk a little bit more about it. These are the sites: Sherman Shabazz, Blackhawk Gompers, Senate Middle School, Cherokee Middle School, Toki Orchard Ridge, Anana, and Crestwood, right? They're geographically located across the district for reasons, because we, as I explained, we have quite a few facilities that are in needs. Our first focus was the buildings most in need of mechanical improvement, accessibility issues, and allowing us to meet the board's sustainability goals moving into the future. What we want to get input on are the decision to build new or renovate is not final. We're continuing to gather input. We have the proposal to the board that is the $507 million. That estimate includes building new. All the schools listed, except for Anana and Crestwood, would be major renovations. Not build new, but major renovations. A little bit about capacity and enrollment, because there's a lot of conversations going on about it. Capacity is the available classroom space, right? And it's the classroom space that was built when the schools were built and the facilities we're in today, dating back to 1928. I would tell you, to modern academic standards, the space that we have today is probably undersized by 20–25% of what ultimately would be needed for a modern facility. And we'll get more into the specifics about that. And then I want to talk about enrollment being the number of kids that are enrolled in attending the school. There's a balance between capacity, right, the physical availability of a school building and the academic usefulness of the building in terms of modern standards. There's been some talk about the schools that have been selected are low enrollment compared to capacity. And those are good questions, the questions that I want us to continue to talk about, collect input, and explain more in terms of why the buildings were selected, right? First and foremost, we're focused on middle schools because the board back in 2020, when they went to the voters to get those referendums passed, talked about the need to focus on high schools and then focus on Shabazz High School, which was the remaining high school that needed to be repaired, and then begin a focus on middle schools. We have 5 middle schools in this proposal for $507 million. There's 12 middle schools in the district. We need to begin modernizing our educational facilities. And so the selection of the schools was a combination of mechanical needs, geographic location, and a focus on middle schools. Okay? So the plan specific, we want to focus on 2 sites. The only site we know for certain that we want to start with is the Sherman Shabazz complex. We want that to be number 1, and that's really because the board committed to the public and themselves that we're going to take care of high schools first. So that's our first site. The other sites, we want to continue to gather public input and talk about, you got a snooze button. The English version. And we want to continue to talk about, go back one slide. That's good. I can read this. I can't read them on top, but I know what the slide says. So going back to our scheduled plan. So we're going to continue to gather input with probably 9 more, 10 more, several more sessions over the next month. And that's really to help us pick the sites that we're going to do each year. So think about sites as, this would be considered 1 site with 2 schools. So we could have 2 sites, but could it be 2 schools or 3 schools or 4 schools? Once we pick that, we're going to continue then to come back to each one of those school communities, get additional input from the families and the community and the staff and those that care and want to have a say in the designs that we're still developing. So that's really critical. We will not begin construction until the spring of 2026, so we have quite a bit of time with those 2 sites that we picked to do in terms of continued public input, work with our architects and our other partners in terms of the construction management firms that we'll be working with. Part of the consideration of the geographical location and the sites that have the green space to allow us to build new is this notion of swing space. For the high schools, we were conducting classes during the construction phase. None of us believe we can do that with elementary and middle schools in any significant way. So that means if we're not building new, we need to have a place to plan out where families and teachers will be showing up to teach. One of them is to use the vacant spaces if we build new. Another one is to look at other elementary or middle schools that may have space where we can bus. Another one is to buy basically movable modular classroom spaces, right? But the issue of swing spaces will help us determine our order and what we do next in terms of this 5-year construction phase. All right. This repair and build new, we'll talk when we get to the specifics of Sherman Shabazz and handouts before you. But no, we planned on building new. School would last 50 years. The schools that we renovate will be lasting for 25 or 30 more years. The schools that we renovate, any of the component parts would have a lifespan of a minimum of 10 years. And so that was kind of our standard in terms of costing out these projects. And then to build new, we use the 60%. If the cost to renovate was more than 60% of the cost to build new, the financial factor said, on the numbers alone, you should really think about building new. But I want to tell you, the numbers alone didn't determine the list of the schools. It's really the driving force is content and the academics, as I mentioned, STEM, the arts, community spaces, right? The schools themselves, which is not the bricks and mortar, but the kids and the families and staff within. Oh, they just reminded me, keep that mic up, Bob. Sorry about that. Okay, next slide. This is a little bit more in terms of explaining the cost to replace ratio in terms of which I already mentioned, learning environments, accessibility, safety and security, progress towards the sustainability goals, which we'll talk about, geothermal, and then just the operational efficiencies in terms of much easier to maintain ongoing annual cost when a facility is new versus constantly renovating and dealing with nonstop repair issues. All right, finally, the interesting and important things. Here's school buildings. Okay, so you have all this in front of you. I want to spend a little bit of time. This is every one of our, we did 46 schools, I think, in the facility condition report. Don't quote me on that 46, it's really close. But 14 factors were evaluated. Orange and red, D and F. The mechanicals I talked about, the 10 schools that were selected, really are in serious bad shape when it comes to the mechanicals, the HVAC and the plumbing. Other issues in terms of high priority were sustainability and accessibility issues. But that's how we kind of focused on the schools. Because a lot of people will say, well, my school was a C. And I say, first, look on the upper right at the mechanical and mechanical HVAC and mechanical plumbing. Because that was like a priority for us in terms of picking facilities to work on. Okay. And you can see the picture on the side, current school and green space, which you can see on the handout. All right, next slide. Yeah, I got 17 seconds. You'll have to just give some time. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so a little bit on this slide, and these are just visualizations to help us talk about this. These are not definite plans. A lot of people say, well, I don't think the gym should be on, I want to make sure I heard that. Some people say, well, I don't think the high school gym should be on this corner, I think it should be over in this corner, right? But this site tells you the yellow is the existing building, the dark blue is the proposed facility, the geothermal field is here, stormwater retention, different access points, right? It's just a rendering to talk about it. I've learned a lot about geothermal and all the technology behind it in terms of sustainability. Geothermal, consider that like the gold standard, right? It's drilling down deep in to use the heat from the earth to heat and cool your facilities. A lot of things have to be contingent, right? So a lot of work will have to be done, whether a full geothermal field can be installed on any one of the sites. But that is what we costed out in terms of, to meet the board's sustainability goals, we want to go all in on sustainability and energy efficiency. And so we've talked about it. Our work on the Sherman Shabazz to renovate was $88 million. To build new was $108 million. And those were the two numbers that were side by side, which is like, as I said, on the numbers side, it goes to a recommendation to the board to build this complex brand new in the green space side of the existing building. Then the idea would be potentially leave this building open for a specified time if we need it for a swing space as we move to other schools, the 10 schools that have been identified, right? Okay. Questions? I forgot my question time. I got 10 minutes for it. I'm way ahead. I'm way ahead of everybody.
Can I ask a question, or
Yeah, I can.
how many of the 5 schools that are going to be rehabbed have air conditioning now? You know the answer?
I don't know the answer in terms of off the top of my head. I know each school has some air conditioning, I believe, but I don't.
I mean,
We can get that.
aren't they all boiler? Aren't most of the schools have a boiler, like hot water system?
This one has a boiler for sure. I don't know for sure.
So one question that was submitted is, please address the contention that the $500 million referendum is for HVAC and air conditioning for the schools to be rehabbed. Do these schools reach net zero when rehab is completed?
So the board has zero greenhouse gas emissions goal for the district by 2045, right? It was to, what was that question again?
Please address the contention that the $500 million referendum is for HVAC and air conditioning for the schools to be rehabbed. Do these schools reach net zero when rehabs are complete?
Well, the 507 million will address a lot of things. Mechanical, HVAC, mechanical, plumbing, critical in terms of a school facility will be addressed, but it's so much more, right? It's about modernizing, really the middle schools is our focus, with a few elementary schools to go with, modernizing academic facilities, creating community spaces. Whether each school building individually will be net zero, I'm not sure if that's capable, right? Definitely more energy efficient, definitely a huge step in terms of the board's goal for sustainability, but each building net zero would require probably significant investment in solar panels along with geothermal, so I'm gonna say, we'll look into that. But I'm gonna say probably not, but on an individual school building, right?
We didn't have any other questions submitted, so we could move to the next part.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess right back on schedule with the help of all of you.
If you come up with additional questions, feel free to write it down.
Is there going to be a public comment session where we can just do like a, hello, welcome to the district kind of thing, or none of that?
Yeah, let me run through these next slides and then we'll open it up, and then it's sort of Sure. So we'll kind of work our way through the rest of it, and then we're all here, and we can all mingle, ask questions, and we'll kind of work through what engagement should look like at that point. So I'm the opportunity here to talk you through sort of a dreaming phase. It's incredibly unusual, and there are so very few opportunities for school communities to design a brand new school, and we want to really maximize this opportunity. And hope that we have that opportunity for you all this fall. We're going to think about different and specific areas, and I'd invite you to think about what exists here already at Sherman and Shabazz around flexible classrooms, around gymnasium space, the cafeteria where students spend time between classes, the library, and also other things like accessibility, parts of the building that certain students can never get to. Safety and security, how students and visitors and families would enter the building to ensure secure entry, and as Bob mentioned, also sustainability. You have at your table pink and yellow Post-it notes, and I want to sort of differentiate those both for you and ask you to use the Sharpies at your table to write some things on as I work my way through these boards. On the pink, you're writing things that you like or appreciate and that you would like to be the same, meaning we have this, we want to make sure we have that again as we design a new building. So pink is for things you want to stay the same or want to make sure that they exist in the new design. The yellow Post-it notes are for things that you would like to be different, things that you see in these images that you've seen in other schools that you don't have now that you would like to be included. So again, pink is for things that should stay the same. Yellow are things that you would like added into your design. At the end of the presentation, I'll ask you to then go put those up kind of by the picture that represents that thing you either want to keep or add. We'll take pictures of those, and then all the Post-it notes are pulled back together to document. So starting with flexible and collaborative spaces, we're in the business of instruction. How can spaces be leveraged to help our students learn more effectively? Flexible spaces that allow for different kinds of teaching and learning than we've had or been able to do in the past. Seeing students use spaces in ways we're not used to seeing in our more traditional spaces. And so I'll work my way through a variety of slides here. So on this slide, you can see students have a variety of seating, and they have places where they can collaborate and work together outside of classrooms and in common areas. Next slide. Here you can see how we have spaces for students to hang out. We have a whiteboard here so students collaborate, cafe height tables for students to have a separate conversation while in that same area. You can also see natural light as a fixture in some of these spaces. Next slide. Here you can see one example of how larger common areas can be included, and you see what's referred to as a social stair. If any of you have toured Bell Phillips Memorial since their renovation, they have one of these in what used to be a courtyard at the school. You can also see other flexible areas for seating. You have walkways up above, and these spaces can also be used after the school day for performances, presentation, and focus on the arts. Next slide. Here you can see how carpeting can be different colors to designate different classroom spaces, different age groups, different grade levels. You also have glass walls that can be closed to create smaller instructional areas, opened up to create more flexible use of a much larger space. Again, you see different kinds of seating that create spaces for individual students, small groups, or large groups. Here again, you can see different kinds of a more traditional, sort of modernized individual student desk. And here you can also see where there's sort of a smaller isolated area of whiteboards where groups of students could go in and work separately. Back here, the same thing. So you could have students break into groups and break into those areas separately. Here you can see how you have bright colors, again, natural light coming into the space, and then furniture that's tied to those spaces to sort of create sense of identity in different parts of the building. Next slide. This is another example of how flexible seating can be incorporated into a common area. This could be a classroom, this could be a cafeteria, there's a sink over here, there's a place to put slides up here, and then wherever we have ceilings that are a little bit higher, then there would be treatments to make sure that sound still travels the way that it should in those large areas to prevent echoing. Next slide. This is an image of a space that is in our Southside Elementary on Madison Southside in that new school, where in what used to just be a common area, creating a smaller space where a teacher can meet with a small group of students, do some targeted instruction. Students could meet, gather, and then you can see that there's whiteboards integrated in that space to again facilitate teaching. Moving on, let's talk about accessibility. We want to make sure that our spaces are inclusive and welcoming and are tightly tied to the sort of school culture and climate that we want to create, ensuring universal design so that every single person that comes to our school buildings feels they belong and can access all of our spaces. Next slide. Here you can see a ramp allowing students to sort of seamlessly transition from one level to the next, and then you have flexible seating in a variety of levels, again with integrated panels that can be used for instruction. Next slide. Again, another example of a ramp that currently could be just a flight of stairs, but you carve out a little bit of extra space and make that a ramp so that it becomes ADA compliant. Next slide. Here you can see open bathrooms and accessible sinks. Again, drinking fountains at different levels, but most of the bathrooms in our new high schools don't have doors and are open, sort of airport style. Most new schools are designed in that way, again, creating more flexible use. Next slide. Moving on, talking again more specifically about classroom spaces. We want our teachers and staff to create thriving learning environments, and they need spaces that support them in doing that. Different desk options, multiple learning spaces. We talked again about flexible sized groupings, either from the large group down to individual student. We'll work our way through a couple slides here. Especially in our high schools, you see some of this where you have some tables and desks that are a little bit higher and some that are lower to sort of naturally create different groupings within a classroom space. Next slide. Here you can see different, again, use of different colors in a classroom to sort of designate different learning areas. Again, large windows and natural light. Next slide. Here's another example where you have integrated sort of counters that allow you to do lab space, a space for the teacher, and again, a lot of natural light. Next slide. In our high schools, that we've developed with a focus on maker spaces and STEM, integrating sort of larger lab flexible spaces that can be used in ways that a traditional classroom can't and where previous facilities did not allow. Again, creating larger spaces with an emphasis on hands-on learning that can be used in a variety of different ways. Next slide. This is an example of an art space, and so you can see how use of stools, a much higher ceiling. You've got, again, sinks integrated into the space. You have lots of storage. These tables, again, can be pushed together to create sort of one larger collaborative area. Next slide, please. Here's a lab space that has new technology like 3D printers. You've got a sliding glass wall that allows students to experience a classroom setting maybe one day, and then the next day they go to the other side. Next slide. And this is what it looks like on the other side of that wall, where then again we have more of a lab space. You have electricity hanging down from the ceiling here, allowing those spaces to be used more flexibly. Everything's on wheels, so the teacher can work with students from day to day to shift up how the classroom is structured. And then you also have integrated dust control and electricity that supports equipment. Again, not only the glass sliding walls, but also a lot of natural light into these spaces as well. Next slide. Another space that just shows, again, integrated sinks, stools, things on wheels, again, electricity from the ceiling, and then large glass windows for natural light. Next slide. One more example of something like a Lego table, so that spaces that are designed specifically to foster creativity. Again, lots of windows. You can see over into the library here, which also helps just having line of sight so that a teacher can supervise students in a variety of spaces, but again, be using the space in a more productive way. Next slide. One more example, you can see here what look like booths in a restaurant. This could be a cafeteria, this could be a collaborative space. This is what it could look like if it's raining and we're not going outside after lunch, just space where people could play cards, get together, study, etc. Next slide. Thinking about libraries, here we are. Libraries is sort of the heart of literacy and where we want students to hang out, love picking up books and working their way through them. We also want them to be shared spaces that are sort of collectively owned by all the teachers of the school and they're comfortable bringing their classrooms in. Next slide. Again, very colorful, lots of natural light. If you've been in the libraries of, again, our new high schools, they look more like this with all sorts of flexible seating around the edges and as much natural light as possible. Next slide. Fun shapes for bookshelves, again, to sort of create different areas within the library. Over on the right, you can see more flexible seating at different heights. Again, lots of natural light and windows. Next slide. Here you can see, again, lots of natural light, another cubby area. Again, the purpose of this and these light fixtures, just to sort of inspire some of your thinking around how spaces could look and where you would like to be, where you'd like your children to be. Next slide. Again, use of colors. Here you can see the colors are here. You have a bright wall and then you have lots of different bookshelves in different places and lots of natural light. Next slide. Commons and cafeteria. Where we want students to come together, building friendships outside the classroom, and we need spaces where they feel comfortable and included. Next slide. Again, you can, in a lot of our schools, the cafeteria is also sort of the space where we would do performances. And so this is also a place where we can feature the arts, but during the day, the tables were allowed and this becomes the cafeteria. Treatments at the up on the ceiling to sort of prevent sound from bouncing around. Again, lots of natural light and a classroom that overlooks the cafeteria. Next slide. This is another example of the cafeteria where you switch it around and students go in to get their food and turn around, and then where they would actually sort of check out a little bit more in the open space to create a different feel as opposed to having to sort of work their way in to check out. Next slide. This is, I believe, Southside Elementary again. So you have large glass doors that open up, creating a much larger cafeteria space, and then you can close these back down to sort of separate those, and they could be used as a classroom space or pull a couple of classrooms together to collaborate in a different way. Next slide. One more showing how wood elements can be used. Again, natural light kind of in all of these pictures. You see another performance space here, but you also see all of the wood treatment in the ceiling. Let's move on to gymnasiums. We'll start with a picture of Southside Elementary. Again, things that are consistent throughout these slides, lots of bright colors on accent walls, lots of glass. Again, here's more bright colors and lots of natural light in these spaces. Keep going. Another example of what could be a performance space, we could have a movie night here. You have accessibility with a ramp to get back up on the stage. Lots of flexible use, including curtains that drop down to separate spaces so that we can have different classes on different sides or activities going on in a large space that for a larger game could be opened up and you have competition throughout the entire space. 54% of our students district-wide are involved in co-curricular activities. We want to make sure that we're thinking beyond sort of the regular school day into what students do after school in the evening to stay engaged in our school communities. Monitored and controlled entry, we want to also be mindful of safety as we work our way through it. So I'll show you a couple of examples of what some of those safe entries could look like. Here you have students who are entering and checking in the building that way and then are buzzed in. Next slide. This is another example that shows a double entry so that students coming in after school starts would come in, go into the Welcome Center and check in, and then into the school building. Students who are leaving go out through both of those doors. If you think about your entries the way that they are now, when it's cold outside and the doors are open and all the students are streaming in, the building will drop temperature 10 or 15 degrees in that area until everybody's in, the school day starts, and then it slowly warms its way back up. All of our high schools have been redesigned with double entries to make them more energy efficient. Next slide. Here's another example of how you can use the architecture to sort of help create a more welcoming, common entry point so you can see from across the way when you're driving up and visitors would know exactly where they're coming. Signage and again, architectural features that make the school building and the school community unique. Next slide. Sustainability. We've touched on this a few times, but also just wanting to make sure that we want the building to last for a very long time, and in order to do that, we also want it to be sort of energy efficient and sustainable in ways that our current buildings are not. Let's look at a couple of examples. Again, here you can see use of sort of wide open spaces that allow for air to move pretty freely. You also have cathedral ceilings in different places that allow for air to move around, and then again, using lots of natural light, both up above and down below, reducing the amount of lighting that we need in the space. Next slide. And this again is back to Southside Elementary with a little bit of a green roof, a big skylight, and an outdoor classroom where teachers can meet. So let's shift back to our Post-it notes. Again, ideally you have your pink ones where you're writing down things that you like or would like to keep. On your yellow, you're writing down things that maybe you saw here that you would like added in that you don't have. And if you end up with things on either Post-it note, whatever you have, put it over here. We'll be able to make sense of it. Before we get up and sort of open this up into a little bit more of a Q&A forum to interact, mingle around, look at these pictures, and dialogue a little bit, I wanted to put up the QR code, if we could. So as we sort of wrap up the formal presentation this evening, I want to thank you for your engagement and for being here. I know there's a lot of information to process, but we value you taking the time out of your evening to come and sort of hear from us, learn a little bit more about what we're hoping to do for our school communities. Before you go, if you could use your phone to submit this survey, that would be great. But at this time, we're also just going to open it up and allow you to put your Post-it notes on these boards, talk with each other, and talk with us. Go ahead.
And I have another question that came in. It's more of a comment. I don't think we were expecting an answer. Just general feedback. Please have a better traffic safety plan for pedestrians, cars, and bus safety with construction. East High School was a disaster when the principal was out daily directing traffic and saving lives. And I'll give it back to Jay. I don't think we have any other questions, so we can go to the
I will say that we are very thankful to have wrapped up construction at our high school. It was, as Bob mentioned, there's a lot to do that while in school for 2 school years and 3 summers. So traffic patterns shifting with fenced off areas and closed parking lots was certainly one of those challenges. So thank you for that, Jen. Thank you again for being here. I think we're gonna shift us over into being a little bit more informal if we can. Okay? Thank you all.